Good night, everyone. Thank you for connecting to the most viewed business program.
Yes, as always, we bring interesting topics to learn more about business.
To- Today we will discuss international business from 2 points of view. These 2 points of view will have to be centered in a major statement.
The statement of today is international business is properly conceived, can be highly effective method or tool to help overcome the poverty afflicting different societies by taking into advantages or certain benefits provided by commercial globalization. This requires that the various actors involved reconsider the interests, positions, and interaction.
Through the years, globalization has been known as the process that makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. It has wiped out jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities, not to mention that various unequal situations it has brought to different populations. Local and indigenous cultures have been highly affected by mass production and cultural homogenization, not to mention the damage caused to jobs, wages, and incomes of poor people by dislocations and competition of international trade and foreign investment.
Adding to what you just said, globalization works and operates mainly in the interest of the richest countries, as Laura just said, which leads to the fact that they continue to control and dominate world trade. This means that sadly, the less economically developed countries are in charge of providing the wealthy ones, with cheap labor and raw materials. Just taking into account this point that we just mentioned, it already gives us a really bad image and perspective about what globalization is about.
Yes, you're right, but paradoxically, it's possible like to reduce and elevate poverty and inequalities through um, international trade in developing countries. So, and I will show you how. Like a country that opens up to international trade will find many benefits. It brings with it economic growth, and it is economic growth that will reduce poverty and inequality. So trade openness has a positive impact on the growth of developing countries through several points. So the first one is like a better allocation of resources, like each country specialize in the production of goods and services where he is the most efficient, and which allows an increase in like production and living standards for a given quantity of production factors. Then there is the enlargement of the market, and which allows economies of scales and gives the most productive firms a greater incentive to innovate, to pushing up the productivity of the economy as a whole. So when a country's firms can access to a larger and a richer foreign market, they also gain access to a level of demand that like allows them to achieve the economies of scale necessary like to deliver the sustainable economic growth. This is particularly true for low-income countries with small domestic markets. And then there will be an increased competition, which reduce monopolize, rent-seeking, and also corruption, which are like very common in developing countries. Then it will also increase the access to new technology. And finally, foreign direct investment is primary vector of this like changing through the acquisition of new production techniques, for example, with the opening up of the marketing networks of industrialized countries through the development of like intra-group trade, etc. So through the constraints, it will create in favor of greater stability of macroeconomics policy and the business environment. So foreign direct investment is favored by trade opening. Then in the virtuous process, the increased demand for like labor-intensive product on which developing countries specialized pushes up wages, leading to a higher standard of living for the population. So in a poor country, we can say that international trade will be very beneficial for the population. And the best example we can take, it's like in East Asia, because there trade has contributed to a dynamic process of economic growth that has lifted more than 300 million people out of poverty over the past 20 years.
Yes, Lily. In some countries, international trade causes various problems, and mostly in poor countries, the ability of the state to compensate for this damage and in general to alleviate poverty and inequality is very weak to the poor economies of that same country. When saying that globalization has helped decreasing poverty and inequality is based on factors such as the Gini. One, but developing economy uh, has been searched deeper, and this information can be an example, for example, of China, a country that was a developing economy, as you said, and where poverty and equality has decreased, but it did not decrease because of globalization. Instead, it has decreased due to the internal factors like expansion of infrastructure or land reforms and policy changes.
Indeed, if it's badly managed, international trade can lead to internal inequalities, like in China, as you said. But however, most of the time, developing or underdeveloped countries that have a real will to participate in world trade have to review the functioning of their government and institutions. Above all, there are like several criteria that countries should respect and put in place to ensure that globalization is like favorable for them. So indeed, international trade is efficient for all when the country has developed its like public services, like transport, education, or health system, and when the government respects the rights of its inhabitants, in particularly the respect of property rights. So this is very important. Secondly, when the government limits the action of elites, politicians, and other powerful groups to prevent like a small part of the population from um, appropriating the income or investment of the rest of the population. So in other words, it means that limiting and controlling corruption. And finally, a government that promotes equal opportunities for the whole society is needed. So these criteria encourage investment and participation in economic production. So this development it's very important and makes it easier to open up to international trade and thus lead to poverty and inequality reduction. And in China's case, as you said, there is no freedom or no respect for human rights. So this explains the presence of inequalities, and that's not the fault of international trade.
Well, taking into account all that you just mentioned, how can you just say that trade is so good when globalization has also made it easy for big companies to manufacture their products in countries in which works rights are limited or not existent, for them to have very cheap labor costs? With this, we can say globalization helps the companies to take advantage of the poor who have no choice but to work for any salary and any work conditions. For example, workers from Asia are called by Europeans slave labor, as factors such as the wages in where the most manufacturing countries just pay half of the fifth of the living wage, and people are forced to work from 14 to 16 hours a day, the 7 days of the week. The health conditions are unacceptable for employees, They usually work with no ventilation, breathing in toxic substances. Accidents, fires, injuries, and diseases are very frequent occurrences on these labor conditions, and on top of that, workers regularly face verbal and physical abuse. Besides from this, the most scary part is the fact that 168 million children are forced to work, and there's even places where families have to send their little girls for 3 to 5 years just to receive a minimum wage. And to conclude, there are countries where even the government helps these businesses force workers to do this kind of jobs.
Well, yeah, there were some great points were made in the discussion, but now we're going to take another look to this great globalization theme. We're going to take another look with another statement that we proceed. This statement will keep us running the conversation in another way that we're going to plan it right now, and we're going to discuss it based on what this statement says. So our statement is what are the advantages of globalization for making international trade work? So, as I mentioned, we're going to take this statement or this question, may say it, and we're going to take it from here, taking this globalization theme, and start to work it out. So, now starting with this, I would like to use a quote from this Jack Welch, a CEO of General Motors, and it says, "Globalization has changed us into a company that searches the world, not just to sell or to source, but to find intellectual capital, the world's best talents and greatest ideas." This gives us. I really decided to come up with this quote because really I think it says a lot of our world right now, our globalization economies, and is that we're looking not only to sell and to do that, but we're trying to look out for the best, and that's one of the greatest things that globalization will bring us. It will keep us more together. We can have more information. We have the facilities in communication. We can really talk to anyone in the planet in the maybe a second, 2 seconds, which is amazing. But to keep up with this, and I'm gonna get to that in a moment, I would like to have a little conversation and let's pick it up in a little history of where all of this came from. So let's go back to 1944 and let's talk about where this globalization, this new world in which we're living is going to be, what is happening there. So in 1944, it was a great convention. It was called the Bretton Woods Convention. Here, people, economists from all around the world were heading into a new success. So they start to get together and talk about what are they going to do with the certain circumstances that they were having, because they came from this Great War, the Great Depression, World War II. So they started to look for any alternative that they could make to create peace. And what they really came up with is the idea that was really discussed before by Daniel Ricardo and Adam Smith, this idea of every country producing that wealth or that thing that they can do better and really specialize in that one, and the other things that they really do not have the capability of constructing, of creating, they will have it imported from all around the world. Like, for example, let's take Japanese really good technological things. They will do it because, and they will specialize in that, and they will import to all around the world, export, I'm sorry, to export to all around the world because that's what they are good of. So they came up with this idea, and they really had it growing. The GDP started growing 30 years, like consecutively. It was really, really good for all the world. But then, starting the 80s or maybe late 80s and starting the 90s, people start to think about what can they do better. These tariffs and these things that were supposed to work and control this interdependence around the countries, it started to go really, really low. The people start to think about this sense of global efficiency. And what they are talking about here is that all of the market should be united into a really sense of we are all equal. So if I am importing some good of your country, I don't know, let's say United States into Colombia, it will have the same opportunities and same treatment as a one that is national, and that's what we started to think. In this moment, a lot of people started to oppose, and it was a real mess. Like for example, United States had GMO meat created and tried to export it to Europe. The problem was that Europe didn't want to accept this meat, didn't want to take it and sell it in their market. Then United States went to the WTO, and in that moment they started to think this is not fair. We should have the same opportunity that they have in my country as I'm gonna have it in their market. And the WTO really said, well, this is not fair. You should really change this. So this is where it really changes. And my point here that I've been trying to say, that I'm trying to construct, is that legal systems and politics is what will make a change in globalization. I know all of that problem that you were saying about these children that were working, 168 million, I thought, that were forced into working, and all of that problems that we're having with the wage, the minimum wage, and all of that, exploring people. But all of this changed in the matter of legal systems. So if we started to change and evolve into a system that will treat more equally to the people, we're going to have a better way into a more globalized and not perfect, but better system and economy, a better market. And what I'm been trying to say here is that globalization is good. It has clearly a lot of problems, like I don't know, these wage and all of that, what that I've been saying, and maybe the ecosystem will be more damaged with this, but it has a lot of potential and it can bring us a lot of things like technology, wealth, and all of that stuff. We just need to start looking where we need to look, and it's that legal systems and this type of policies that the economies have. Just to finish this, I would like to say that the trade, international trade with globalization, there will not be international trade without globalization. Right now, the most important things, the most important asset that we discovered through globalization is communication. So without communication, this international trade will not be possible. This connection that we have now, this type of nearness that we can feel, makes international business really more factable and easy to develop. So how does globalization really help international trade? Well, communication was one of these great things that happened in globalization. And also we have that with globalization, we have the opportunity of maximizing our benefit, our profits. And that will make more investments, that will make more economic growth. We could see more GDP growing and all of that trying to see. So I think that will be my first statement for a while.
Well, Alejandro, I do understand what you're saying about international trade. It has a lot of great impacts, but when studying them closely, it is clear that poor are not benefiting from this, as the sectors that are involved in this type of trade, as the products that are being traded, do not have much involvement from the poor sectors. Plus, minimum wages and rigid firing policies in the organized sectors have to some extent enable unskilled workers to benefit from this trade. For the poor people to benefit will also be important to have gender equality distribution of gains of trade, and the most affected by this are women and children, as you already said. But here we're discussing if globalization or international trade is actually good or bad. And you're saying that we are depending on politics and internal government actions. And I think here you're just giving us the kind of the reason to think that globalization by itself and international trade is not good, because it will need many other things to act in a very good way to actually work in the way that you are saying. Even though it has very great benefits, you're actually giving me kind of the reason to say that it is only affecting in a good way the rich people, as it has been always said, and the poor are always going to be by a side and affected because the policies and internal governments do not act. And if they don't do, then globalization and international trade will keep doing what they do.
Okay, yeah, you're right. First of all, we can't have globalization or any type of international business without taking into account the most important, um, like let's say, person or strategic management here, that is the government. If we don't take account the government and its policies, well, we are not talking about globalization or international business. It's important to say that the period that I'm trying to say that the globalization and international business really can help people. It has its flaws right now, as you mentioned. I know that. I can acknowledge that. But I think that I just brought you that's the problem. I bring you the solution. The solution it will be these type of changes. Now, actual like let's talk about a little bit of the actual situation between globalization and international business. It has been proved that the how can I say that poverty rate has really decreased, and really people are starting to work better. Also, since we have this globalization idea and this type of uh, being interdependent between continents and between countries, we've had the largest period of peace among like let's I'm not trying to say that there's not conflict, clearly is, but if we start to see a little bit of the past of the human race, we are basically seeing one of the most peaceful moments around all our nature, and that's why I think well, that's a real point to take into account here. Now, you mentioned a lot of trouble and all that, and that people we need to start seeing people as equal and all that. And I think that globalization and this type of communication between a lot of countries and a lot of groups between all around the globe is making us realize that we are not that different. And if we are, we need to acknowledge that. But you're extremely worthy. Okay, so you're extremely valuable no matter what. And globalization is giving us that feeling that you're not alone. This communication type of thing has created one of the most greatest communities in the whole world and the whole history. Let's just talk about. I really can't say if I'm okay. The LGBTQ, I think it is, community is one of the greatest in all around the world. It's not only in one continent. It really doesn't matter in which country you are. If you're part of the community, all that people it will be with you. So it is pretty good because we're acknowledging now that we're more close and more similar to each other due to globalization and this knowledge of people around the world may be as similar as me or different, but we can connect, we can be together. And that is taken into account into right now legal systems in which we're trying to reduce this type of racial discrimination and sexual discrimination. It has never been seen before, this type of legal treatment to these oppressed groups of people. Let's just talk about women's suffrage. Okay, uh, it happened between a lot of time, and right now it's happened with a lot of people. Like it's due to globalization. It started with a little piece, with a little movement, and it started spreading all around the world. And right now, that is was like it is really important. So I think it is more right now, I'm just trying to acknowledge that we can make it better, but the things that globalization is giving us is much, much, much better than the things that bad that it gives us.
Well, you mentioned earlier the peaks and how they have been growing per capita. We can say that people are less poor, but actually, who are you talking about? Because when saying that globalization and international trade has actually been doing this, it's not true. Because accordingly to a much deeper search from the results of the Gini, it is due to the internal factors of each country, not due to the internal traits and globalization. Taking into account your other points of communication and the way globalization has made us more united and all of this, I also want to ask you, how will this make more united to the poor people that can actually afford or uh, be benefit from this communication around the world, because they do not have any light, any technological things. I mean, they don't have access to anything that you just mentioned, and still you say that we are getting to this very equal part of globalization, but it actually is also making the unequalness grow.
Okay, yeah, right, right. So I know there's a lot of trouble right now, and I acknowledge the information that you give me, but I will say that this the poverty really really did decrease poverty, inequality like Gini. That really is a different method, so it's a different topic. What I'm trying to say here is that due to globalization and this international feeling of we are one together and we depend of each other, we are helping on other people. So you're talking about the poor right now, not only about the poor. Okay, yeah, I acknowledge that there's a lot of poor people, but then again there's a lot of international organizations that are trying to help them. Now we are now understanding that we need to work as one, we need to work as a group. That's why we have conventions. We have the United Nations. We have, for example, right there in the presentation is UNICEF. We have all these things that try to make us, all of us, a better place. And I know that we really have a real, like a lot of poor people, and you think that we are not trying to help them, but I think that's not true. We are acknowledging that factor, and we're trying to move forward as a group, as together, helping them by the means that we have.
Okay, well, I also agree with Laura. I don't think globalization is like good at all for anyone. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the um, equality of the people. It's not good for the cultural damage that it causes. So moving forward, I would like to talk about a very important part that takes into account the multiplicity of actors that the globalization movement is composed of. So we're gonna talk about the actors um, that are the part of globalization and the actors that are the ones that like make the globalization work. So the initiatives through networks of relationships that are involved in this, um, the most known are production, finance, markets, technology, organizational regiments, institutions, corporations, and people, obviously. So with this, there is the notion that the world has become a global village, implying that increased exchange relationships among the multitude of factors such as nations, institutions, organizations, firms, and private individuals. An important implication of the increased exchanges among several actors, which I mentioned before, in our globalized world is increased in the interdependences um, at all levels of human interactions, which are the main like implicators in here. Um, Evidently, nations, for example, that are interdependent have increasingly opened their economies to facilitate the technological, political, and cultural exchanges among them. Um, for example, a reporter in the Human Development Report Contacts between people and their values, ideas, and ways of life have all increased in an unprecedented way. So this means globalization is not good for them. Also, technologically, economic, political, and socio-cultural exchanges among several actors in globalized world have numerous benefits and at the same time challenges which need to be understood and managed. It has become an established fact that researchers agree on the dual effect of globalization, and also globalization provides global market opportunities and global market challenges. So it's not that globalization is, it has its great points, and as you said, it works and it has a lot of good things for I don't know, some people, but it's not equal, and that it's just not good because it should be for everyone.
Yeah, yes, I acknowledge what you are trying to say here. And I just want to say that I'm not trying to sell you this idea of globalization as perfect. It is really new. We really had a really short amount of time, let's taking into account all the history of human race. It's really new for us, and we are trying to discover how to make it better every time. As I told you, it could reach 1944 is the moment in which we started to talk about globalization as we knew it now. So we started to develop all of this, and we're starting to understand how it worked and how we really can make it work for everyone. Okay, and what I'm trying to see is that what I'm trying to say here is that globalization is helping companies, is helping a lot of people getting jobs, it's a lot of people getting more money into their economies, making a better place, better quality of living. Right now, it's not perfect. I'm not trying to say that, and I acknowledge that people are really. We have a lot of poor people, but right now, let's take into account all of these international organizations that are trying to fix all of that damage that we already have, like taking into account the global goals. They were planned to help the environment, help the human race to really stay living in this place that we're trying to really mess up as much as we can. But we know that we're having there a problem. We were not taking into account that we were destroying our home. But now we know that, and we're trying to look forward to make this place better. Just like, let's take into account now UNICEF. It works, it tries to make it better for most of the people, for most of the kids. It's trying to make it a better world. And I think that it's not only that it is good right now, it has a lot of good things, but I think it has the potential to make the world as we want it, equal. Yeah, we want it for everyone, and we want it rich. We want to be all happy because we now understand that we are all in this together. And I just think that it could be really, really good, more than it is right now.
Okay, now I'm gonna give some examples to understand a little bit more about the actors that are responsible of globalization. So interacting actors, especially countries and businesses, firms, will have an increased exposure to challenges emanating from economic and industrial barriers. For example, the Japanese currency market as well as the Chinese currency market is considered to be manipulated in that they are intentionally set to be held low in relation to other major trade currencies, such as those of the US dollar or the euro. So with this example, is a development that when no like remediate would render goods and services exported from the US and Europe into Japan or China to be expensive. So this is like a great example to acknowledge that globalization doesn't work for everyone, and it doesn't apply for like as equal as it should to each currency in the world. Um, this is because a Japanese customer will have to have more money in order to buy a competitive good or service from the US or Europe that are being sold in Japan. Another example is Walmart or Carrefour have been experienced in China, offering retail services in an environment where the social cultural forces constrain their design and implementation of strategies have resulted in each of the firms having difficulty to implement position in and for example the countries like Canada and Mexico. So to wrap it up, in our globalized world, characterized by, for example, intense competitors and fewer barriers to trade, and like almost all firms in any industry share this kind of experience. So whether a service firm providing mostly intangible solutions or a manufacturing firm producing physical or tangible goods to perform competitors will mean that the firm must be able to stay ahead of competitors by, for example, providing a bundle of benefits which its rivals will not be able to match. So these were what I just mentioned are examples that, as I just said, globalization doesn't take like room or place or equality for each market, each currency, each I don't know, retail, each store. So that was my point.
Well, okay. Great. You're telling me that it's not fair for everyone. You're telling me that you're clearly is not as equal as you try to say, but as I was trying to say, like is not perfect, but competition is out there, and competition, as you mentioned, is really good for us and for everyone. We need to have that, and that's another point in favor of the globalization and international trade. If we take into account the competition, I think that Lily said a few time ago, um, competition is good. Competition will create more success, will create more improvement. People will start to really develop their products to make it better, to make it good. And also having competition will make that the prices will go down. And for us, we have more power over that companies. So that will make us more powerful than the companies, as you said. So what I'm trying to say here is that competition is pretty good, and we have it here like something that really, really favors us like consumers. If we just didn't have globalization, let's say that Colombia will not trade anymore with anyone. We are not going to have globalization at all. The local market will really start to explode us. First of all, I'm not clear that we're going to get all the goods that we need to have or we usually had. So that's a real good issue, like a real bad issue. If we don't have international trade, where are we going to get all these materials and all these things that we were getting from other parts that really compete in our market and give us a good price? So if there's only a few companies in the market, you're going to be created monopolies or oligopolies, and that will make that they will have more power in us, and it will make us more unequal. They will take more of our money, they will be more rich, and we will be, well, we will be worse. So what I'm trying to say is it's not completely equal when you get up there, but it's gonna give us more and more opportunities and more things that will help us like a consumer.
Okay, just taking into account what you just said about what, well, you have said through all the conference, you have make globalization, international trade seem like a opportunity to equality. But when talking about, for example, uh, competition, you're right. We need competition, but we need competition with equal opportunities, with equal conditions, and that does not happen with nowadays trade, international trade and globalization. It does not happen for the workers. It does not happen for the different economies. I mean, when we talk about the different factors that are affected by globalization, we're talking about everything, and you're always giving us examples of how can it be better, but it could never be better if other things wouldn't be involved. So you're always saying that I know governments should be implied, politics should be implied, and if we take that into account, we will say that international trade and globalization does not work alone and does not give equality, because globalization and international trade also make industries grow. Industries have more power now, and for example, we see industries that actually do many bad things, and even governments are with them, because sometimes industry have grown so much that they are more powerful than a government. And all of this power was created by international trade and globalization, and all the inequalities, all the misconceptions of education, gender inequality, and all of this is also created by globalization, and it's also been growing because of it. So you may said that it could be in some way um, like better, and that you can bring us solutions, but when seeing all the different problems that it brings, like, you are questioning a lot if it really works and if it will really work and eventually will have the solution for the many problems that it causes. And then we talk again about what you just said of how we're damaging our uh, world, and globalization and international trade have also created that. There's a really great example about how the industry of fishermen has grown so much that it is much more powerful than the governments, and it is actually killing the ocean, and it is actually the the most producer of pollution of the ocean, and it is the one that's killing lots of animals that shouldn't be killed, that are fished by mistake. And this power that globalization and trade are giving to this type of industries is actually not working for the world, even though international things such as the UN are working in favor of them, because globalization is working against it.
Okay, right. Yeah, yeah. That's a real good point. But I just want to say that, first of all, you're telling me that really repeating that we can make this better, and we can make it better by legal systems and politics. What I'm trying to say here is that you need to take into account the countries and the governments. That's the most important thing in this game. It's the most important player here. That's the man that is going to give you the rules to play the game. If you don't have them into account, well, there's nothing to talk about it. So what I'm trying to say, the governments are the ones that really are now doing the FTAs, for example, doing these agreements to make it easier to trade from here and there. So we need to take them into account as the most important piece of this game. Let's say about it. So we can't take it out of there. Like if we want to make it better, well, we want to take there into account the government. That's why in the UN, each government has a representation to talk about this type of problems. Like, and that's when we took out the global goals, for example. I know we have problems, and I'm trying to say that we can solve them. For example, you're talking about these bad systems and all of that, and the people that are working from $1 or less a day. let's say an example. Apple, a few years ago, I think 2008, 2018, I'm sorry, was using some organization or companies in China to produce their phones. And well, it was acknowledged by some reporters that the conditions in there were really poor. Like they were having the worst days. They were not having pay. They were like actually living among fungus and a lot of bad health systems and all of that. So when that new came out to life, that an American company was really paying for that, they need to stop contracting that people, and they need to stop doing that because well, it's not well seen. But the problem is with the policies and legal system of that country in China, because it was no problem in there. People really do that without a problem in there. But thanks to globalization, they started to acknowledge this type of mood treatment and these type of things that they were doing to the people, and it started to change. I'm trying to say that it has some problems. We know that we have some problems, and we're trying to change them. But why? By working together. So imagine that we, like the same example, if we do not have international treatments, if we don't have international business or a type of connection with the outside, we're losing the opportunity of being bigger, of being better and thinking about not only about ourselves. And I just think that we have a lot of opportunities working with all around the globe that has more technology, more knowledge, more wellness, and they can all come to us. I think we actually have to work into a lot of things, but what we could get out of globalization is much, much better than just get out of it.
Well, yes, you may be working to have such an equality as you said, but then again, it also brings so many bad factors that you question if those good that you just mentioned are really like good enough to be just that, and just to not give such power to industries that are so damaging for people, the world, the animals, and many, many things that you are working for. So you're just saying that international trade and globalization works against international trade and globalization.
Can you repeat that? Excuse me, I really didn't get that. How am I saying that is working against
International trade
international business?
and globalization creates power to the industries, to the different industries, in such a volume that some industries have much more power than many countries and are over many governments. And then yet you said that many foundations or systems such as the UN and UNICEF are working for our like people and the environment and all of this. But like both things, the good and the bad, are created by globalization and international trade. So basically, globalization and international trade are just not making sense.
No, 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 no. That's not exactly what I'm saying. Look, I'm trying to say that we have been working in a way with international treatment and international business in a way that is not helpful for everyone, not even for what we have in environment or people. We are not making it completely well from the beginning. We acknowledge that things and we're trying to work it better. And I'm trying to tell you that we as an international together, like international world, we can make more good. What I'm trying to say that not only I'm talking about these I don't know, little things that are trying to make it better. I don't know. I don't know. Shit. Let's talk about like the international, the The UNICEF and the UN, they are trying to work and they are really making changes, making policies to make this world a better place. They're trying to take that problem that you are taking here into the discussion and trying to solve them. And I think they're really going to solve them because we are now in a moment in which we know that if we don't act right now, it's going to be too late. The change like this is not going to happen in 10 years, in 20 years. We need a lot of time because we need to take a lot of things into account. And it's not going to be easy, but I'm trying to say that it will make it better. And I think that what we have got from internationalization is much better than what we didn't have after that. Before that, I'm sorry.
Okay, so thank you everyone to take part of this debate. It was really interesting. There is a lot of arguments and really like kind of rich debate. So thank you very much. I appreciate to debate with you, and that's all.
Exactly.